Right. So, Dom, I'm excited that we've carved our time finally to talk about the automation we do at Yellow Door and for our clients. So, let's maybe start with the very first automation that you did and why.
Cool. Yeah, so right in the beginning, the first thing we did was to automate scheduling our social media. That was mostly because we had quite a few clients that we had to do scheduling for, and it just was such a time-consuming process. Um, and yeah, no one should have to do that manually, so it seems like a good thing to automate. It is possible to plan your post directly on a scheduling tool, but I just find that there's a lot of caveats. You want to get approval from the client first. We want to make like spelling and grammar checks and all of that. So it's better for us to plan our content, as you know, on Airtable, and then have that automatically schedule once we've approved the content with the client. So in order to do that, I created a Zap on Zapier, which basically, once the posts were approved, it sent the information through to our scheduling app, which is metrical. So it was like a simple process, but actually hilariously time consuming because each sort of one, I got better at it, then had to go back and redo them. But I guess that's all about the learning process.
Yeah. And I mean, it's something we've done probably for what, 8 years now. And if you think of the
Exactly.
hours it saved our team, and especially like account execs and interns who typically in an agency would spend so much of their time doing that. So
Exactly. And it's
yeah, I
also the
think it's
human error that comes with it. I mean,
yeah,
it just avoids that whole copying and pasting wrong situation.
yeah. And you mentioned Airtable, definitely one of the platforms that we live and use every day. Thanks, Uno Duval, if you are reading
Yes,
this or listening, for introducing us to it. But what other software can you not live without?
so many. But yeah, Airtable is definitely one of the big ones. Of course, Zapier, and my like favorite no-code automation tool. Um, I'm increasingly more attached to even metrical, just having all of our content there. Watergraph does a lot of our reporting, which is really, really useful. And anything from native Apple. I live on all my Apple devices, so everything needs to work together. So that's mostly the tools I use. I mean, that obviously doesn't include the stuff we use on a daily basis, like Slack and Spark and Asana and Harvest.
Yeah.
So many things.
Yeah, no, it is when you list them, it's a lot. But I think what's interesting hearing you mention them all is how some of them are internal and some clients get to be part of. So with
Yeah,
Watergraph, they get to see all the key stats visually. And I think that's
that
such a game
dashboard. Yeah.
changer because that, yeah, exactly, having a dashboard just makes so much more sense. Um,
Yes.
and I think speaking of that, internal and client takes me to the next question, which is how have AI tools like ChatGPT influenced the way you think about automation? I know it's something we've played with so far, but looking forward, what role will it play?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this. Obviously, it's so relevant right now, and how it applies to our business. And it's so broad that it's difficult to narrow down. But I think one of the things or one of the processes that you have to do when you're thinking about automation is looking at the tools that you have in your business and identifying the best tools and the best software. And AI just has the ability to like really just give you so much more information about what tools they are available. So it gives you that sort of broader scope of not having to literally search for a software for CRM or whatever. It can give you so many options. So it can also you can also use it in the planning process to suggest your workflow, like looking at a specific scenario, how it could be improved, troubleshooting issues like that. And then there's, of course, the actual tool itself in integrating it into your process. So, for example, you can set up a process where you get an email from a prospective client, and chat actually then creates the response in a way that's personalized and makes sense, and even just sets it up as a draft email for you to then reply immediately to potential customers. And you can still vet it and personalize it, but it like saves a whole bunch of time actually figuring out what the client is asking for. So there's that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
as it improves, you'll get more options as it goes along.
Exactly. It'll keep evolving. And I love that you mentioned like potential clients, because I think my next question's around just getting a little bit more specific about what we do at Yellow Door. So how would you go about automating onboarding? I know we've done it for ourselves, but if you were doing it for a client, what would that look like?
So I guess the steps are the same for any automation, but we can delve into a little bit more. So the first step is to figure out what processes and software are currently being used in the business to onboard clients, or if there are any, if it's all being done manually, or whether there's a better process. And then mapping it out. So saying like, okay, what is actually the best way to get from A to B? And then making the decisions about each step. So do we need all of the software that we're currently using? Do we need to minimize? Can one software do more than one thing? So you can replace a few different steps. So you just trying to streamline it basically. And then it's about plugging those things into your favorite automation tool. So we use Zapier, but there's also Make, and it just depends on what you use. And then creating that flow is about what triggers the process. So where in the process do people come into this workflow, and then what are the steps that they follow. So with onboarding, for example, ours is the trigger is the actual acceptance of the quote, and then we create a Xero quote from our proposal software, so that will they accept on our proposal software, we create a Xero then quote, which then gets sent to them. Once that's paid, it gets added to our project management software, assigned to the right person, and added to our time tracking system. So there's all the places that we need it to be done is automatic. And then they also get sort of correspondence after that from us saying, okay, we're onboarding, here's anything they need to sign, etc. So it depends on the service for us, or how we would onboard them, but that's the main sort of route we take.
Amazing. And it's a lot to think about. You think, oh, onboarding, cool, like, send a quick
Yeah, it
email,
took
but
me
there's
a
actually
good
so many steps.
while. Yeah, it took me a good while in the beginning. I remember standing in our boardroom the one day, like mapping it all out on our whiteboard,
I
and
remember
just getting
that.
so excited about all of it. But it took a while to like refine the process, and it's also about teaching the team to know what the steps are, so that they also don't interrupt the process or double up manually. So
Yeah.
people have got to let it happen as well.
Yeah. And what is next on your list to automate? I know there's always a backlog that we would love to do and don't get to.
Yeah. So I'm busy automating the process of onboarding our consultants. So we have such a big base of consultants that we call on, that have different expertise for depending on what services we need to offer our clients. So it's quite a process vetting them, making sure they all have correct paperwork signed for us to be able to send them work. And in the beginning, this was all manual, but I'm trying to now automate this process. And it's basically the best way for me to do that, I think, is we get them to apply through a form, and that information is then used in creating a template agreement, and it's sent to them automatically for them to sign. So that's the one process, and then we can also, once they're onboarded, automatically add them to the correct Slack channel so that they're with us, and they get a confirmation to say, you're now onboarded, and we'll be in touch with our first brief to you once we have something relevant. So that'll be next.
Nice. And if we go back to thinking about the client side, what is the question you get asked most often in an initial like automation consultation?
Mostly just what kinds of things can be automated. People just don't really understand the practicalities of it. So I think based on this conversation, you can hear that it's basically anything can be automated, but it's actually about whether the process lives on a cloud-based system or not. So any process that entails a piece of information that is accessed by the cloud or the internet can generally be triggered. So for example, like I mentioned, a form needs to be online. So if you're currently doing sending an email with a PDF and then people fill it out, that's not going to be useful to us. So we can't automate that process. We don't have the information living on a server, a database. So it's all about finding that information, or finding a way to get that information on a cloud-based system. And then any other cloud-based system can be linked to it. So like I mentioned, Xero, Slack, Asana, all of those things live on someone's server. And that means that we can access it through an API. And the API we use is often the Zapier system, which is built in already. So it kind of just allows us to open up that world of software using a tool like Zapier.
Yeah, no, I think that it makes so much sense. And it's one of those things it's hard to get your head around if you haven't experienced it because it's not tangible. But once you understand a little bit more, I guess it opens up your mind to all the possibilities, which is exciting.
I think so many people don't realize how much of their business is manual and how much of that is prone to human error. And that can all be erased, not to mention all the time that it frees up. But just not having to manually capture information is a big part of job satisfaction, I think.
Yeah, huge. And last question, what has been your favorite automation to date and why?
So a couple of years ago, I was involved with a MVP, minimal viable product, of an app that worked with a wholesale fuel distributor to create an opportunity for trucks to fill up their tanks at approved fuel stops. Sounds complicated, but essentially it was a massive project. It took months to figure out all of the integrations for this app. So I was in charge of all of the sort of periphery around making sure the process was automated. So the app itself did some of the work, and then that information that came from the app needed to go to somewhere. So there were master dashboards for the client, and then customer facing dashboards per truck that needed to have the right price of fuel and where fuel stops and where they fill up and invoicing. So it was a massive learning curve. And we basically had to put this whole thing together from scratch without really understanding the end result yet, because it was an MVP. And the app has now been rebuilt and is very successful. And so I'm super proud to have been part of that initial solution, and it led to some funding, which is now the current version of the app. And I learned so much along the way, and how to problem solve, and many late nights trying to figure it all out.
Amazing. I remember you being really sucked in a good way. And getting stuck in. I think again, it's that like you start with one thing and then you're like, oh wait, but it can also do this and it can also do that. And that kind of like, just one thing leading to the next snowball.
Yeah,
Amazing.
absolutely.
Great.
Cool.
Well, very excited to see what is next on the automation list,
Yes.
and take the conversation further.
Cool. Thanks for the chat.